I thought, gosh, what if the server trips and that drink splashes out and maybe a few droplets will land on my skin and I'll lick them off? I can't really put my finger on it. I think that now, as I'm talking about it, I see that what I was looking for is there anybody else out there who drank like I did? Is there anybody else in this restaurant who feels the way I feel at this moment?
Welcome to Amy Liz Harrison's podcast, Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy. A Gen Xer who overcame her struggle with alcohol to become a best-selling author and mental health advocate. She shares stories of hope and offers ideas for others struggling with mental health challenges, spirituality, ADHD, or maybe just family, travel, and logistics. One thing is for sure, you'll leave with something to chew on. And now, here's your host, Amy Liz Harrison, with your mystery meat sandwich.
Greetings, compadres. Welcome back to Eternally Amy. Here's your mystery meat sandwich. It's a great advantage not to drink among hard drinking people. And that is from The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald. So I thought drinking made me more interesting. I thought drinking made me funnier. Drinking made me wittier. Drinking made me sharper. And that was my perception of my drinking behavior. However, what I didn't realize at the time was even though I felt that way, not everybody else felt that way, which became apparent as time went on and as my disease progressed and I started slurring my words and I started having these episodes of not being able to get out the words that I wanted to say with the articulation that I would have preferred to convey them. And I really struggled to try and make it seem like I hadn't had very much to drink or that I hadn't maybe been to visit a bottle of Cook's champagne in the bathroom before coming out and greeting guests. I mean, I thought for sure this was the antidote. I thought alcohol was the antidote that was making me miss personality. And truth be told, it was ruining on a fast track my relationships, and I couldn't even see it, and my reputation. I mean, people don't want to hang around somebody who is drunk all the time. And so this quote by The Great Gatsby, I get it. I get it in that, when you are sober, you have sort of the upper hand, if you will, in events that involve drinking because pretty soon you reach this point in the evening, and I always call it the Beetlejuice moment when people are drinking around you. So, do you remember that scene in Beetlejuice when Winona Ryder is around the table with all of those interesting characters and with her parents, and all of a sudden you hear, the Harry Belafonte song playing, Deo, Deo, and she starts kind of levitating and everybody else around the table starts levitating and they're kind of dancing a little bit. And that is what I think of when we reach that point in the night. It's the Beetlejuice moment where everybody else is kind of dancing around like Lydia Dietz and they're just levitating. And I'm still on the ground, kind of looking around, watching the scene going, okay. And, at that point, I know that any deep connection that I may be attempting to make with somebody is probably off the table at that point. And I also know that I will be forgiven a multitude of, quote, sins unquote, if you will. If there's any kind of faux pas that happens, which I generally don't care about that stuff anymore, but if anything occurs, if there's like some kind of a wardrobe malfunction, or if I say some word that's canceled, it will generally be forgiven because nobody will remember. And so I definitely understand. I understand this quote, and I'm here to tell you it is one of the benefits of being sober. So if you're sober curious, if you just have some kind of a deep, quiet, inner thought that perhaps, just perhaps, you're not being your very best self by all of the alcohol that you consume and the way that perhaps you are manifesting that in the eyes of others, then maybe consider, all right, I might try a little bit of not drinking. Now, for me, it was like I didn't have a choice. I was completely, wholeheartedly out of control, and it took me down to my knees. But maybe if you're not quite that way yet, maybe it's worth an experiment. I don't know. Food for thought.
And now, onto the chaplain's chat.
What we're going to talk about on that note is sobriety firsts and how I got through them. So one of my sponsees just had a baby, and it's gotten me thinking a little bit about when I had my babies and going through all of that process of, see, I'm old, so we did baby books, right? Or we just would kind of get these little cute worksheet things and we'd write down, baby's first tooth, baby's first steps, baby's first solid food, baby's first this and that, right? And when I got sober, it was very much like that. I had first times for so many things. And it became something that I didn't physically mark down, but I did have an internal epiphany and realization that I kind of like was enjoying the benefits of, oh, wait a minute, I got through that, check the box. Okay, now I got through that, check the box. So specifically, I'm talking about activities that I used to do with the comfort and the luxury of checking out and numbing out with alcohol. So, for example, the first concert I went to sober. So, first concert was U2, and we were at the Mariners Stadium. I think it was called Safeco Field back then. I can't keep up. I apologize. Can't remember the current name. But we were in the suite and we were the first ones there. So my husband and I walked in, and the first thing my eyes fell on was on the credenza. There were probably 25 bottles of red wine, all with different labels. And I loved red wine. And if I close my eyes now, 11 years and change later, I can almost smell red wine. Isn't that crazy? It's just that much ingrained in me, or I drink that much of it that I don't know, maybe it's still fermenting in my body somewhere. But I looked at those labels, I looked at the bottles, and I turned to Andrew and I said, I just don't know if I can do this. And what I meant was, I did not know if I could stay sober. I could not fathom how I was ever going to get through this concert, followed by work event after work event after work event, where there was going to be liquor, where there were going to be all kinds of different, I mean, alcohol was a thing, right? And I was addicted to it. It was my addiction. And they say that alcohol is it's a disease of attachment. So it's if you have attachment issues um, in your past or in your mental health challenges bucket, that perhaps that might be something that you are prone to do, is to drink alcohol addictively, which Bam, I fell right into that category. So standing there, looking at all those bottles of wine, about to, see Bono come out on stage, I just really had a moment where I just doubted everything that I had just learned in treatment, that I doubted everything that I was hearing in meetings, and I just couldn't see how any of those people that I had met who had this, that, and the other years of sobriety, how they could possibly be honest. And I didn't understand how Andrew could walk into that kind of situation and not be standing there salivating like I was. And so someone else arrived, and the person walked in, and we started making small talk, and I was extremely uncomfortable. I just felt like I wanted to crawl out of my skin. But I stayed, I listened to the person who was talking to me, and they were sharing something about a recent trip they had been on. And I tried to listen for something that I could find common ground with, that I could develop a rapport with, and then I commented on it, which is, yes, ladies and gentlemen, and non binaries, how conversation generally works. I do realize that. But in those moments when you just feel fragile, and early sobriety provides many of those opportunities to feel fragile. It is really hard. It is like you've got to come back to the basics. We're talking the ABCs of like, all right, my feet are on the ground. I can feel the air on my skin. I can smell popcorn from the concession stand outside the suite. It's really these grounding techniques that really kept me alive and pumping in early sobriety. And when I say that they helped me, I'm here to tell you it's not that I was overjoyed to be sober and let's roll out the red carpet and have Ferris Bueller's Day Off parade rolling down the Chicago city streets. No, I was functional. I was functional and capable of not grabbing a bottle of that wine and running through the door and just completely going bananas. I just stayed the course. And you know what that is? That is sobriety. That is serenity. That is not adding extra chaos to my life that did not need to be there. And as kind of vanilla as that sounds, or, you know, Wonder White bread, just very kind of dry and not exciting, it did feel that way at first. And it grew into my preferred feeling over time. It took time. And so, since we're talking about early sobriety and sobriety firsts, I just want to say that it was not my preferred feeling then. I would have done anything to escape the way I felt in that moment. But I knew that I couldn't. I had a sober partner there with me. My husband was sober, and he certainly wasn't going to let me just go crazy and grab that bottle of wine. And there were social expectations, right? I'm not going to just have the choice to go bonkers in a social setting like that. And so I stayed. I stayed present and I stayed sober. And as much as I did not like watching everybody else drink, I got through it. I got through it. And the second thing that I will bring up, my second sober first, is dining in restaurants. Okay, so my husband and I used to go on date nights a lot. It was how we stayed connected, partially. and it was important to us, and we loved eating out. So there you go. And in early sobriety, and I don't remember the actual first time that I went to a restaurant sober, but I remember watching servers walk around the restaurant with trays of alcoholic beverages. And I remember just following them with my eyes. I just wanted to see who was ordering what beverage. I wanted to see how fast they were drinking it. I wanted to see if they ordered a second one. I was interested in, I don't know whether it was because I knew I couldn't have it. I don't know whether it was because, I thought, gosh, what if the server trips and that drink splashes out and maybe a few droplets will land on my skin and I'll lick them off? I can't really put my finger on it. I think that now, as I'm talking about it, I see that what I was looking for is there anybody else out there who drank like I did? Is there anybody else in this restaurant who feels the way I feel at this moment? I mean, these are questions that I'll never know the answers to, and I certainly didn't then. But in that moment, I just wanted to know that I was normal, that something greater than me was at work and was going to have a plan for my life as a sober person, because I just couldn't see it. I couldn't see it yet. And I was still craving alcohol. My obsession to drink had not been removed yet. And I just felt lonely. I felt lonely without my best friend, which was alcohol, which helped me to escape the way I felt. I wanted to change those uncomfortable feelings, which is why I drank in the first place. That was my first experience introducing, well, experiences plural. Those were my first experiences reintroducing myself into normal society at restaurants. As I said, I don't remember a specific one, but I just clearly remember those feelings. Okay, next, I want to talk about the first gala event that I went to, the first work event. And let me tell you, this has got some practical tips and tricks in it because the first gala event I went to for my husband's job, I was pretty annoyed the whole time. I was annoyed that there were bottles of wine on the table and there was, I think, a pitcher of water. But if you wanted anything else other than water, you had to get up and go stand in the bar line. And that made me so irritated because I thought, here I am. I'm squirrely as all get out. I'm just feeling like my entire body is vibrating because I'm so aware of all the alcohol around me. And I know in my head that I don't want that life back, but I do. Like, let's not kid ourselves. If I could have snuck some drinks and gotten away with it, or snuck some drinks and knew that it would not affect me later in terms of guilt and shame, I would have done it. So if I knew that I could have kept my spirituality and my sobriety intact, and, this is the point where I was just germinating a new life. I was cultivating this new garden with new soil. And I'm not going to lie, it was starting to feel kind of like a little bit satisfying. So I knew I would totally drink if I could save that feeling, but I knew I couldn't. I knew I couldn't drink and still have those little buds of hope of a new life, right? So it was just that I wish I could, but I can't. And then later it turned into, you know what? Maybe I don't wish I could drink. Maybe this is going to be okay. And that's more along the lines when my obsession to drink began to dissipate. But that first gala event, and I do actually feel pretty strongly about, and this is just a sidebar soapbox topic, but these gala events that do not support non drinkers. And I totally get it. If it's an auction, people are encouraged to drink to spend more money or to be loosened up enough to be willing to spend something way above and beyond what they had planned. I understand that concept, but not everybody drinks alcohol. And I think the society awareness of that fact is very low in lots of areas, demographically and also culturally in different career paths. And my husband's career path is one of those. Anytime there are corporate events in any job or for executives, there is this automatic assumption that executives and wine cellars go together. Do you know what I'm saying? Like every time we would ever search for a house above a certain price point, there was always a wine cellar. And it was kind of like, oh, okay. It was kind of my husband's and my running joke, like the wine cellar. Okay, we've arrived. But, alcoholism is an equal opportunity disease. And you do not have to be of a certain economic status to be an alcoholic, whether that's high or low or somewhere in between. It is going to find you and catch up with you if you are an alcoholic, at least of the hopeless variety, which is how I describe myself, my drinking. So, the practical tip part that I promised you in the gala work event section of firsts is to carry Pellegrino or whatever you like to drink that does not contain alcohol on your person. So I brought a big old purse to these events and I brought my own drinks because the alternative, of course, was going to stand in the bar line with everybody else who was waiting to get a mixed drink. And I'm not talking a Shirley Temple, right? Everybody else who was waiting in line for their gin and tonics and their vodka sodas, I'm standing there with them, just shifting my weight back and forth and salivating and wringing my hands. Okay, so that is my practical tip that saved me more times than I can tell you. The second thing that saved me is telling whoever was the server for our table, telling them, I don't want any wine. Please don't give me any wine. Please don't ask me if I want any wine. And I would be super kind to them and smile at them and hand them my wine glass so that the person didn't forget. And, that was key too, because had somebody put a poured glass of wine down in front of me or asked me, hey, do you want red or white? I mean, I was fragile. Again, I use the word fragile. I just don't know that I could have maintained my sobriety without putting up those safety measures first. And that's a big theme for me is safety. How am I going to feel safe in this situation if I know there will be drinking? And now, later on down the road, I just don't go, or I leave early, or after doing this long enough, I know what's going to be my jam and what's going to make me feel uncomfortable. And really, it has very little to do with alcohol anymore. But I just know if I show up to a drinking event, I'm not going to be building authentic friendships and connective tissue with the people there. It's just not going to happen. And really, I also get that that's not the purpose. The purpose of those events is to raise money, to celebrate somebody, to celebrate a cause or an event or a charity. So that's that. But I'm more selective, whether it's any kind of a gala event or any kind of social event. It really doesn't matter. And these days, quite honestly, post pandemic, it's also just kind of a magical miracle if I even leave my house. So there's that too. So that's how I got through my first gala work event. And I will have you know, and this is my final practical tip on that, that I was irritated on the way home and by the whole thing, by feeling uncomfortable, by being in early sobriety, by the fact that other people could drink and I couldn't. And I had Andrew stop at the 7-Eleven and I got like 4 bags of Sour Patch Kids and I ate one entire bag on the ride home. That was how I handled it. Not necessarily proud of it, but you know what? I'm not drinking right now and I didn't relapse then, so I stayed sober and that's the point, right? Okay. So next, the first time I got sick. So I woke up one day, it happened to be a couple months after that first U2 concert. So I was still in early sobriety, but I had gone to the Def Leppard concert the night before. And then when I woke up the next day, I was sick. I had a sore throat, I had a cold. You could hear it in my voice. I was coughing, and I had to essentially cancel the plans I had for that day. And I got on the phone with my sponsor and I was so upset. And I said, everybody's going to think that I'm drinking because I canceled. Everybody's going to think that last night at Def Leppard I drank. And so today I was hungover and that's why I canceled. And I just had these false narratives going that I needed the voice of reason to just step in and tell me, no, people aren't going to think that. And you know what? So what if they did? And that was like where she just put the knife in my stomach and turned it. And I was like, what do you mean? So what if they do? I really was still concerned with appearances and people thinking that, I was just out there, just this fake person telling lies about being sober. And she's like, what you need to do is set that aside. And you, Amy, have to remember that people who really matter in your life, they don't mind if you're sick. The people who mind and the people who are making up stories in their head about why you're canceling, those people don't matter. So the people who matter don't mind, and the people who mind don't matter. And that was huge. She, of course, took that from another 12-step individual because that's how this works. In the 12-step fellowship community, we don't reinvent the wheel, we share tools. And that tool has helped me more times. When I am spinning out of control, I can recognize it now and I'll just go, whoa, 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 wait a minute. Uh, so what? So what if somebody else thinks this, that, or the other thing because you're sick or because you're tired or because this? Chances are 95% of the time, no one's even thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves, right? And so that was a lesson that I learned early, which I loved. But when I say I learned, it's not like, oh, that never revisits itself. Of course, occasionally it does. And I just have to pull out my tools and remind myself, okay, people who mind don't matter. The people who matter don't mind. And that's helpful. Okay, next up. Oh, I saved 2 of the best ones for last. Here you go. First, sober sex. So lest you think I'm going to dive into a ginormous dissection of my sex life, which I won't, I will not tell you that this is like, oh, the first time I remember having sex in sobriety. I'm just kind of painting this with a broad paintbrush, okay? That in general, sober sex is different than non sober sex. And I remember getting used to sex without any kind of alcohol or any kind of passed out status or nearly passed out status, okay? And the thing about it is, this is the bottom line because I'm going to just say, the best husband in the world who is kind and who is just patient and loving and wonderful. When I got sober, I did not feel worthy of having physical sensations that were positive, that were just all nothing but positive. I didn't feel like I deserved it. I still felt so much shame over what I had done with the kids and the DUI. I felt so much guilt over that I felt 100% undeserving of this sweet and wonderful and pure and fulfilling sex life that I had with my husband. And it took me a couple months to really say to myself, this is okay. This is okay. It was almost like I was back in church, right? As a Baptist growing up, telling myself, oh, this feels good, so I shouldn't do it. It was this whole unlearning and relearning process. And slowly over time, as I continued to do esteemable acts in my sobriety, okay, so I was building every day through action the life that I wanted to live, which was a sober woman who deserved all the good things in life. But I kind of just didn't believe that it was me yet. I really just, it was like I was acting as if. But sex is so vulnerable that, it was just this kind of, oh, but I can't really act as if in this because I'm bringing my whole self to this moment and I'm not at a meeting, thank God. And how do I build esteemable acts within sex that I will then later feel like I deserve? You know what I'm saying? I was kind of way over analyzing the whole deal, is my point. And really, all I needed to do was go, you know what? Back the effing bus up. I deserve this. I deserve to feel good because it was super fulfilling, but I just wouldn't let myself embrace all of that positivity. And finally, last but very much not least, is the first time dealing with difficult people. And for me, this is a specific set of people. And I called my sponsor and I said, I don't know what to do. I'm going to be dealing with these people. Help. And she and I sat down, and I'm just grateful I had warning. I'm grateful I knew ahead of time instead of just bumping into these people randomly. And so, what happened with these particular people is that they did a lot of walking all over me and kind of bossing me around, if you will, and telling me what to do. And, it really doesn't matter if it's a person or if it's an institution or whatever. I'm a huge, huge believer in healthy boundaries. And so she and I sat down together, my sponsor and I, and wrote out all of the boundaries that needed to take place. And then I awkwardly presented the boundaries to these people. And you know what? It worked. Did it feel good and, comfortable and wonderful? No, it didn't. Uh, but it was tough. It was tough and necessary. Definitely something that needed to take place because in the absence of aforementioned boundaries, ooh, things were not good. Things were not good at all. And sometimes that's what it takes is just a little explanation of, I'm going to teach you how to treat me. Does that make sense? And I started out when I did boundaries, originally when I started practicing them in early sobriety, just having these little kind of party lines. And I'll go over those in a different episode coming up because, boundaries are so essential in life. They're crucial, really, to me, to me as a person, to me as a sober woman in long term recovery, just for my own peace of mind and for the health of the relationships that I'm in. That's what we have to do is sometimes explain or show whatever the case may be, whatever you're more comfortable with, somebody else how to treat you. Do they always sort of obey those rules? Nope. And that's okay because people do what they do. I have found more often than not in my life that people don't do things to me, they just do what they do. And sometimes that doesn't harmonize well with the person of who I am, just as some of the things that I say don't become this functional, congruent piece of art with somebody else. It's just the nature of different people. It's okay. It's completely fine. So, as I became a little bit more advanced in setting and maintaining boundaries, which sometimes is really easy and other times it's hard. And early sobriety is one of those really rough points. And so I'm just going to give a little snippet as I wrap this up of what it's like further down the road, just to encourage you if maybe you're sober curious and you're possibly going to try recovery and getting sober. This is what you might have to look forward to is actually feeling okay with some crunchy conversations. And not always, but and I'll tell you right off the bat, I hate crunchy conversations on the whole. I can't stand them. But when I know that they're necessary, I do it. I do it because I know that I have played the movie forward all the way through to the very end. And I know that the ending is always much better if I've set the entire relationship up for success or, incident or whatever it is that you're trying to successfully complete. And I found that by and large, healthy relationships are not perennial. So, in other words, I guess what I mean by that is if you have a relationship with somebody, person, a family member, a friend, maybe it's a colleague. And I'm talking about those people who they're just consistently themselves and they don't allow for your personal growth, or they would prefer that you play by their rules, which are toxic to you. And a lot of this happened in early sobriety for me also because I simply wasn't drinking anymore. And so there were people in my life at that time who would have, I always kind of say as a blanket statement, oh, everybody wanted me to get sober. I was the last person to realize I was an alcoholic, blah, 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 which is kind of a general gross exaggeration. There were people who preferred me to kind of stay in my sickness because that's what they knew and it allowed them to stay in theirs. And they weren't exactly supportive of my choices. And really, let's be honest, it wasn't really my choice to get sober. I had to get sober. And then eventually it became my choice as I acted my way into new thinking and feeling. That's what I mean is, those people who they just want to relive the past all the time, hash out the old stuff, talk about that time in high school when you did this, that, and the other thing and got busted, and let's go do it again now that we're in our 40s. Those folks, those are perennials to me. So, judging, being intrusive, having expectations, auto advice dispensing, giving unsolicited feedback, preaching, giving lectures. So, all that stuff for me is pretty toxic and it doesn't work very well in a friend to friend relationship, in relationships with a partner or spouse, with family members, anywhere where really it's going to be one person controlling the narrative of a situation and the narrative is not healthy, is basically, I guess, what I'm trying to say. I don't know. I basically think the people who desire to be perennials fail to develop appropriately for their next phase in life, whatever that might be. And the best way that I feel that I can honor the fact that I will still have these, folks in my life at some level. And sometimes I can't. Sometimes it's not safe. But the best way that I can honor, especially if you've been in a relationship with somebody for a long time and plan on continuing it and working on it, right, is to set and maintain healthy boundaries. So I can't really support toxic tendencies for the sake of what that person would desire. And I have really had to say to some people some pretty tough things sometimes. So, I mean, things like if you feel the need to try to manipulate the situation or step around the boundaries that I'm presenting, I'm going to have to redirect you and just remind you that we've had this conversation. I've had to say those phrases before. And those came, of course, we're talking now a little bit later in my sobriety, as I mentioned. But it's so important to start taking these steps in early sobriety. And the best way that I can say to do that, again, which I alluded to, is the party lines, just things like, that's an interesting perspective, just a very non-committal phrase. Or, you know what? I'm actually not in that space anymore. Or, oh, well, that's interesting. Let's try and move forward on fresh footing. And of course, you're going to be saying these things if you try any of these phrases. You're going to be saying these with empathy. It's not going to be some fake kind of, oh, well, that's interesting. You're going to mean what you say because you value the relationship. So, try a phrase that feels good and feels true to you. One that I use a lot is, oh, let me think about that. Or, oh, it sounds like you're really passionate about that. Or, oh, that is one perspective of many. I don't say the many part, but that is one perspective. So it kind of validates the person. You can say, oh, Well, that sounds good. That sounds like you're having a nice time reliving those memories or something like that. That's a good memory. It doesn't mean that's how you and I are going to behave in the future. Does that make sense? You get where I'm going, I think. Hopefully.
Finally, here's your bailout bag.
For your bailout bag, remember to be kind, rewind, and thank you for the honor of your time. And remember to take what you like and leave the rest behind.
Thank you so much for listening to Eternally Amy. Amy Liz Harrison is a best-selling author, speaker, 12-step coach, meditation teacher, and recovery advocate. To find out more, please visit amylizharrison.com. Keep up with Amy on all platforms by following @AmyLizHarrison. Please subscribe and review this podcast. It means so much to us if you do.